service in the house.
Bucket hat. It's bucket hat time.
TC, you're undefeated, man. You're undefeated.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the TC and Company podcast. Tom Caron with you here at our studios at Nesson as the Red Sox wrap up the West Coast trip. A day off, first of a bunch of days off coming up for the Red Sox. Really important considering they have three starting pitchers. They have Thursday off this week, Monday and Thursday off next week, the following Thursday off. Then they got a bunch of games in a row. That's when they'll have to look at putting people in the rotation or acquiring help at the deadline. Lots to talk about with the team playing some of its best baseball of the season. And the perfect guy to do that is the guy who literally wrote the book. Well, edited the book technically on the Red Sox. Chad Finn was in charge of putting together the Boston Globe story of the Red Sox, more than a century of championships, challenges, and characters. Went back to the birth of the club in 1900 and found the best stories and columns about the team, put it all together. Chad Finn, a fellow Mainer and a guy who has written great stuff over the years on the Red Sox, joins me to talk about the team, coverage of the team, fan reaction to the team, and a whole lot more. Maybe we'll talk lobster because we are both Mainers. Chad Finn, this week's guest on the TC and Company podcast. All right, Chad, you have been covering this team. You've been covering coverage of this team. As I said in the intro, you literally wrote the book or edited the book about the history of the team. So are you as surprised as most people are that the Red Sox in late July of 2023 are flirting on the edges of the wild card race?
I'm not totally. I mean, this season in a way has kind of gone how I expected it to, where I thought they would play a little over 500 ball and play meaningful games in September, which is a progress over last year. But this is a little bit different than that, where it feels like there's a real opportunity here to make a leap forward, to get really in the thick of the wild card race, and to maybe even get a double-digit, one-loss record where they're 10 games, 10 more wins, 12 more wins and losses, which I wasn't anticipating at any point this season. So it feels like this stretch right now is crucial to them actually fulfilling a little more than I probably expected back in Fort Myers.
You know, I had them when you do the predictions, I had them at 84 to 86. And I said, if you're at 86, then you are, a couple of wins away from being in the hunt. And I feel they're sort of on the upper end of that. Maybe they're 86 to 88 and maybe 88 gets you in, or at least pretty close to it. What has surprised you though? Is there a player? Is there I'll say up front, the bullpen has really surprised me. I like the Martin and Jansen signings. They've been more locked down in the 8th and 9th than I thought they would, but Winkowski has really taken a step forward, even though he's had some bumps in the road. I didn't know Brennan Bernardino existed prior to this year. So for me, it's the bullpen. I don't know if there's any one aspect of this team that has surprised you more than anything else.
Yeah, I had to look up before I came on with you where Bernardino came from, because I couldn't remember what team put him on waivers when Heim claimed him. But I think a good policy is probably in the future to just keep adding more Dodgers, because Martin's worked out. Turner's been fantastic. Jansen's been pretty much everything you would have hoped for. And all of them are great clubhouse guys too. The biggest surprise to me though, out of anything, is Duran, because I had him as a guy who might be a 4th or 5th outfielder, but nothing more than that after the way he struggled last year. Felt like that he was poor defensively. I mean, he didn't feel that way. He was. And that at his age, he's not prospect age. He's prime of career age, or he's getting there. And it felt like the development just wasn't going to happen with him. Instead, he's just, he's taken all that athletic ability that was so obvious and finally has channeled it into being a productive, dynamic player. And to me, that's the most unexpected thing about this season, is how good he's been.
Mike Monaco and Kevin Youkilis on the broadcast last night. And I don't know if Alex Spear has come through. He always does, so I'm sure he will. But they challenged Alex Spear to figure out if taking only doubles, have Jarren Duran's doubles traveled the fewest amount of feet of anyone's doubles in Major League Baseball. You got little bloop hits, you got normal base hits. I mean, the guy really is. Maybe Jacoby Ellsbury's rookie season is the last time I remember seeing a Red Sox player who was that dynamic with his speed.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Duran's a little bit more electric. That's a hard thing to say because remember Ellsbury scoring from second base on a pass ball right when he came up, but he runs angry, as my colleague Julian McWilliams says. He just hits that first base bag and cuts it, and he's going for second. If the outfielder has a fraction of a second of hesitation, sometimes you don't even need that. If the outfielder has to go 2 steps to his left, Duran's going for it, and I've never really seen anything like that. Certainly in a Red Sox uniform, where a guy can turn what's a single under pretty much any circumstance into a double, and suddenly you've got a runner in scoring position just because of his electrifying speed.
We live in an age where guys aren't supposed to slip through the cracks, right? There's endless reams of stats and analytics on everybody. You do a lot of football, right? I mean, the guys just aren't supposed to sneak through. And yet everything we heard is that no one in the industry thought Masataka Yoshida was worth $90 million. and I've talked to a lot of people in the Red Sox front office. They really look at it as an organizational win because, they got, Gus Quattlebaum was able to get scouts into Japan, even when there was COVID restrictions because they had Japanese guys who were there. They used their analytics to sort of translate what the velocity he was seeing in Japan, how that would play here. I mean, they really kind of used every aspect of their organization, and they signed him on day one. And clearly they absolutely got this one right. Are you not? I'm not that surprised that Yoshida's good because he won 2 batting titles over there. I'm surprised that so many people thought he wouldn't be good here.
Yeah, it's really funny, TC, because you heard maybe about a month ago where there would start being these comments from teams saying, "Oh, we always thought he could hit. It was his defense and base running we were worried about. Like, we were sure he was 300 hitter, hit line drives all over the place," which wasn't the case. I mean, the Red Sox did go out on a limb compared to what pretty much every other organization in baseball, based on what the bidding sounds like, was willing to commit to him. And it is an organizational win. And Heim's been really quick to credit other people with this, but you think about the day when that happened. I mean, it's right when Bogarts left. There's a ton of backlash about them going out and signing this guy who has mixed reviews on how he's going to translate to Major League Baseball. And it must feel really good for Bloom to have gotten this one right, because it was a rough day when it happened. And it's clear that this guy, the numbers and what you see with this guy, with Yoshida, match up perfectly. I mean, he's the real deal. There's no question that he's going to be an excellent major league hitter for several years.
And to me, I remember having a conversation at spring training, trying to figure out who was a part of the future. And I'm not talking about Marcelo Meyer 2 years from now, right? Just over the next year, 2 years, who on this roster are you bringing back next year and thinking about building around? And up the middle was the issue, right? Coming in, you weren't sure about catcher. You weren't sure about center field. Duvall had been a corner outfielder most of his career. Kike Hernandez had never been a shortstop. Shortstop has been an issue. There's no getting around that. But to your point, Duran has solidified maybe the future of center field. At least Rafael may factor into that. And Connor Wong has been a complete surprise to me behind the plate. Not that I didn't think he could play at the major league level. I didn't think he could play every day. And he's playing every day. So all of a sudden, don't you feel like there has been a little bit of a corner turned here that you can start to see the future? They need starting pitching. They need it now. They need it next year. They need it the year after that. They don't have it in the organization. But by and large, you can start to see, not 3 years down the road, like what this team could be at the end of this year or the beginning of next year.
Well, I think the most important big picture things have happened this year. If you went back to Florida in March and asked Chaim, what's the things you absolutely need to go right this season, not to make the playoffs this year, but just for the sake of the organization in the long run, it's that the young guys develop in the way that you hoped. And the number one thing to me is Brian Bayo emerging as I say potential number one starter, but I completely believe it. John Tomasi had this great stat a week or so ago that Bayo's ERA has gone down in 13 of his last 14 appearances. I mean, that's dominance. And you see it with his stuff. You see it with his demeanor. He's a front end major league pitcher now, and maybe an ace in the very near future. That's a huge thing for them to have happen this year, because it's been since Buckles, if not Lester, in terms of developing a frontline starting pitcher from the organization. They just haven't been able to do it. Now they have. That's enormous. Durant's development, unexpected, but gives you a dynamic player for the future if this keeps up. And I think there's reason to believe it will. Yoshida, like we talked about, being a high-end major league hitter, and someone, to me, he strikes me as somebody who's going to be a really good playoff hitter, because he has command of the strike zone. He has a great ability to turn around a fastball or flip it wherever he wants to. I think that's a guy who, when this team is really good, is going to be right at the heart of it. And then Cassis is hitting for power now. So these things that you hoped would emerge as part of the next great Red Sox team, as Theo Epstein used to say, really have happened this year. And there have been bombers. Chris Sale's injury is really disappointing because he looks so good. Other things, Hernandez not being able to play shortstop, stuff like that. There have been frustrations, but the young guys look like the real deal, and that's an enormous thing for this team.
Totally agree. So the big question as we sit here today, less than 2 weeks till the trade deadline, what does he do? What does Chaim Bloom do? He tried to thread the needle last year and got crushed for it. I don't know that he ever admitted he was wrong, but he's pretty much said, I would have done things a little bit differently. Vasquez, I get it. I mean, they got guys back and there's some upside there for sure. But they didn't go all in, right? They didn't get under the tax. And right. So they tried to stay competitive and it fell apart. So what do you do this year? Do you go all in on this team? I mean, they're not going to trade any of their top prospects for a rental or anything close to that, right? But what can they do? If you're Chaim Bloom, forget what he will do. What would you do if you were Chaim Bloom?
Well, sports radio has them trading Meyer and every other Sea Dog for Ohtani. So that's probably what Chaim's thinking about right now, right? And then just sign him to that $800 million extension and get it over with. I think I wrote a couple weeks ago, threading the needle again, but getting it right this time, which is really hard to do. And he did get it wrong in what he brought in last year. Other than Reese McGuire was competent catcher, backup catcher type, but Hosmer didn't have anything left. Tommy Pham was a replacement level player. And the guys who were here were ticked off because Vasquez was traded, and that was justifiable. I mean, he's not the player he used to be. It made sense to do that, but under the guise of playoff contention, and with the 3 wild cards, everybody thinks they're in it more or less now, other than the A's. The players had a right to be frustrated with that trade, and then feeling that they didn't get quite enough back. This year, I think it's a little easier. The degree of difficulty isn't so hard for Chaim. I could see him moving on from Arroyo or Hernandez or one of the middle infielder types, with Story coming back. Duvall might make some sense to trade and open up more at bats for Duran. Ref Snyder playing a lot of the time against lefties, but he doesn't really have to do that. I think what is essential is going out and getting somebody to help and showing these players that we do have a commitment to you guys getting to the playoffs. It may not have looked that way last year. We're going to make sure it looks that way this year. Number one thing to me is getting one of those starting pitchers that's available, whether it's Kyle Hendricks, Lance Lynn, Giolito, the price a little higher. But there's some appealing guys out there who could help the Red Sox, and I think it's imperative that he does that.
I think it's interesting when you look at the pitchers he might want to get into, because you almost feel like he's going to have to find somebody who he would have control of next year as well, because this doesn't go away, right? You don't need a guy for 2 months and then you have, Papelbon and Lester and Buckles and AAA ready to come up. I mean, they don't have that next wave. I don't know Shane Drohan maybe as well as I should, but the help that is there isn't necessarily ready to step in. So, Dylan Cease would cost you an arm and a leg. I don't know if that's even a possibility. The Gabe Kapler's bumming me out because the Giants are playing better. I thought Alex Cobb would be the perfect guy. The reuniting of another Tampa Bay guy. He's under control next year. I think that could still be a really good one because the Giants do kind of have some pitching to spare. But don't you? I mean, he's not going to. I mean, a rental maybe and I don't think he'll bring Rich Hill back per se. Like I could see them getting a Rich Hill type as a rental because that won't cost you a lot and he can throw innings. But I want to ask you about Pivetta because I would have thought 3 weeks ago when they put him in the bullpen, this guy will get traded. They got to try to bump up his value.
It was over. Yeah.
And it was over. Right. I got to give this guy a lot of credit. What he has done, that performance a couple nights ago, with the 13 strikeouts in 6 relief innings, and Cora basically saying yesterday that he will probably start again because we're going to need starters. I think Pivetta now, I think you have to keep him because you need the innings.
Yeah, definitely. I like him out of the bullpen more than as a starter. I mean, he's pitched better out of the bullpen. I think his mentality is kind of that he pitches angry, kind of. And that seems to suit coming out and just amping it up a couple miles an hour faster than you can as a starting pitcher. Now, when you're pitching 6 innings in a bullpen game, that's a different matter. And going out and striking out 13 like he did, I guess you could say that's a starter level. That's a high end starter level performance. But I like him in that role that he's in right now, and he may not be thrilled with it. And I know he wasn't happy being pulled from the rotation, but he's taken to it. And just lengthens that bullpen. The bullpen's in good shape already. It's one of the major differences, like you said, over last year. And I really like how he's fit there. So my hope is that they go out and acquire a pitcher, a starter, and keep Pivetta, in the spot that he's in right now.
Yeah, Sox Stats, the mysterious Twitter feed, had a good line the other night. Bernardino Pivetta is my game 1 starter in the World Series. So why would you mess up that combination? I want to ask you about coverage of this team as we speak. Julian McWilliams is the only Boston writer in Oakland. And listen, the Red Sox are to blame for a lot of this because they've allowed, in some ways, interest to sag, over what they've done the last couple of years. Hasn't resonated with the fans very well. But it is also a shifting media landscape and all that. What do you make of one Boston writer covering a team on the road?
Yeah, my colleague Pete Abraham always keeps me updated that because he's always on the road, unless he's getting a little break or Julian's there or Alex but 2 of those guys at least are always there for us, and then almost always there. And then you look around, and for those of us who've been around a while, you expect a couple of Herald people to be there, and everybody from the local news, the news anchors. You go back to Dino and Lobe and Mike Lynch; they were always there a generation ago, and it's not how it is now. The media landscape is pretty brutal for newspapers and for local television and even for radio. And that's where a lot of them have cut costs. I think the other fundamental issue is that the Herald just isn't what it used to be. It was an alternative to the Globe for a lot of people. It's kind of the city newspaper. And they had a great staff that covered the team really thoroughly and on the road and in depth and with a lot of edge. And, they have good people working for the sports section, but not a lot of guidance there anymore. I don't think. I don't even know who the sports editor is. And, they do stuff from home, and it's just, it's not competitive like it's supposed to be. And it certainly doesn't have the depth that it used to have. And it's affected. It hurts the fans. It hurts the readership. And, I guess you could say it's good for us at the Globe, but it really isn't, because the competition is good for everybody. Makes us better, and it gives everybody in the city a lot of quality options, and just don't have that anymore.
When you listen to sports radio, and baseball is almost covered as a curiosity now, right? But in between DeAndre Hopkins discussions, but there does seem to be a little building interest in this team. I mean, I'm not sure fans are all the way back in yet. I know that Sunday, I haven't looked at the Oakland games, they're late night, but I know Sunday was our highest rated game of the year, the last game against the Cubs. So, people are checking it out and they're winning some games. They're fun to watch right now. Do you think fans are starting to cast a casual glance at the team right now?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's because the young guys emerging, as we talked about, and the wait, what's going on here? The Red Sox are actually in the playoff hunt. Cora mentioned, I think it was on the radio a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, but he said, we need to kind of win 15 out of 20. And thinking back on that now, I think he looked ahead on the schedule and said, we can win 15 out of 20. And what is it, 12 out of 14 now, something like that, just on an incredible tear. And there's been a little bit of buzz among the fan base. The skepticism of how this roster was built seems to be fading a little bit. The disappointment about Bogart's leaving because he's not putting up huge numbers for an underachieving San Diego team, that's kind of gone away. And I think the victories that Chaim has had with Yoshida, with Bayo emerging, things like that, it's I wouldn't say it's entirely captured the fan base in the way that we're used to. You guys aren't going to be getting 14 ratings like you used to with Manny and Papi and Pedro, but good numbers are in the future here if this team keeps playing the way it is right now.
Yeah, I agree. Because they do, when you watch the other night, the leadoff double from Duran, it just, it is an exciting team to watch. And even the way they blow games sometimes it's not boring. We have seen that. I want to ask you about the book. I mentioned at the beginning, Boston Globe, story of the Red Sox, more than a century of championships, challenges, and characters, more than a century of newspaper coverage that you had to sort through to get it down. I can't even imagine, how, take me through that project. How do you even begin to start to sift through all that?
Yeah, it's just really making a master list at the beginning of sitting down and going through every resource you can think of. Yes, even Wikipedia, to find every possible story in Red Sox history that actually might interest people. Every development, every MVP award, every no-hitter, every memorable playoff game, and just build a chronological list. And, we knew how many articles we were going to have in the book. The publisher wanted 225 at first, and I got them up to 325 because we had so much stuff. And so you think, well, Red Sox start in 1901. We've got about 120 years to work with here. So that's 3 articles a year, 2.5 a year. So you're just culling down after you make that master list and just finding the best of the best. And we have incredible researchers at the Globe. We have a librarian researcher named Jerry Mannion, who's a huge sports fan. And if I was looking for something and couldn't find it, I would say to him, can you find the story about when Jerry Remy got traded to the Red Sox in 1977 for Don Ossey? I'm not finding it in our archives, and I'd have it in like 5 minutes. It was incredible. So the real thrill about putting this book together was everything that we were hoping to have. We had Babe Ruth stuff, the sham Jackie Robinson workout. The Globe actually covered that. Every significant trade. I almost accidentally left out the Jeff Bagwell trade. Probably subconsciously, but I went back in one of the proofreads of the book and realized it wasn't there. But every signal, the Globe's been around about 40 years longer than the Red Sox have, and they covered them like as a passionate beat right from the beginning, which made this book, putting this book together, a real joy.
Yeah, it's a really cool read. I haven't read it all. I've glanced through it, but the voices, that's a lot of it, right? Reading Bud Collins again on, talking about, and reading some of the Peter Gammons stuff, kind of, it feels like reading Gammons in real time rather than going back and reading about him now. It's really cool to read the voices that covered the team.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up the same era, in the same state too.
With our fathers working at the same place, which
that's right. For a long time. Just crazy.
Shout out Bath Ironworks.
Good old BIW. That was the absolute pinnacle of it to me, was when I got to the point of going through the stuff in the 1970s and then into the 80s where Gammons was there. Lee Montville was writing a lot of columns and a lot of Celtics columns too at the same time. Ray Fitzgerald, who's probably the most overlooked, brilliant sports writer the Globe's ever had. He died young, but he was a tremendous columnist until he passed away in 1980. And he has my favorite story in the book, actually. It's from when Tiant signed with the Yankees, and everybody was heartbroken. And he ends his column by saying that he's going to go stick his head in the oven, which is exactly how Boston fans felt. Talk about capturing the mood of the fans. That's what he did with that one. But reading the 70s stuff to me was like being brought back to being 8 years old again.
Was there, when you were up at UMaine, was there a writer, was there a Globe writer you aspired to be? Was there one, like when I was at St. Mike's majoring in journalism and Lee Montville was it? Like I wanted to be as witty and as funny and as, irreverent when I needed to be. And I'm still trying to get there and I haven't, but Lee Montville was it for me. Was there a writer that you aspired to be?
I would say it was a tie between Gammons and Bob Ryan, which is kind of funny since they started on the same day at the Globe in 1968. The day Bobby Kennedy was killed, they had their shared byline together. And, both went on to be just, essentially the commissioner of the respective sports that they were best known for. Gammons with baseball and Bob Ryan, obviously, with the NBA. But I liked how their voices just sounded like they were talking directly to you. You could read Gammons and it felt like he was sitting there over, a cup of coffee telling you about every trade rumor you'd ever heard. And Bob Ryan's voice, I'm putting together a Celtics version of this book right now. I'm writing in the middle, right in the middle of it. Bob Ryan's voice was the same in his first byline in the Globe as it is now. He always was very direct and humorous, and you hear his voice when you read his copy, and that's what I kind of aspired to be. Yes,
I realized that not long ago. When I read Bob Ryan, I am reading it in his voice. It's like watching PTI. It's watching him host a show on ESPN. That's what it sounds like in my head.
I think if you'd never seen him on TV, you'd still hear his voice. But that's the greatest gift a sports writer or any writer can have is the kind of planted in your head that way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's a great read and a really cool look back at all the great moments. Before I let you go, it's bizarre. I was putting this together last night, what I want to talk to you about. And I was like, well, we got to have a main mention. But it's just, you and I have a lot of really bizarre parallels, even though it's not like I see you often, right? I see you a couple times a year. I'll see you at spring training and a couple times at Fenway. But you and I were both part of the OT staff when the Globe did OT, right?
Yes.
Which I sort of forgot about, which is the greatest 6-month money grab of my career, which is why it didn't make it. We just all got paid to write whatever we felt like, which was a blast.
Really, I know.
But that was a great experience. Our fathers both worked at Bath Iron Works, which is crazy. We both covered the UMaine hockey team, the 42 1-2 team. I was down in Portland, Maine, working professionally, and I covered them a little bit. Although I didn't go to Milwaukee. You were at the Frozen Four, right?
I was, the big main campus student newspaper budget that we had. Sent a couple of us out there. Yeah, I had a career because of that team.
Channel 13 in Portland, Maine gave me the option to go to Milwaukee to cover the championship or go to Fort Myers to cover the Red Sox, who had just moved there. And it was a good career move because that's actually where I connected with Nesson.
Nice.
But I passed up on the Frozen Four, even though it wasn't easy because I knew that team was. But I was in Worcester where the power went out in the NCAA regional. And I believe, and this is the perfect way to wrap things up, with the Mets coming into town. Did you say you went to the Dwight Gooden appearance at the ballpark in Old Orchard? Were you there?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so was I. So we were both at that game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I had the whole Channel 6 news crew in front of me there, which I guess every media person in Maine was there. But yeah, I remember it being really hot and Gooden beamed a guy and kind of laughed about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, look back and laugh. Yeah. And there were people it was like 10,000 people. It was one of the greatest events I've seen in Maine. I was working in Plattsburgh, New York, and just came home to go. A bunch of my buddies were like, we got to go see Dwight Gooden pitch at Old Orchard Beach.
People forget how big he was.
Yeah,
it was Michael Jordan, and then it was Doc Gooden at that point in time.
That's right.
And Tyson.
Yeah.
But Doc was the man. That was the beginning of the downturn for him. He was coming back from drug rehab at the time.
Right. All right. So I teased this before I had you on. Last question: best lobster roll in Maine.
Oh, best lobster roll in Maine. I'm not all that discerning. I would get one from a chain restaurant or
the D'Angelo's lobster roll doesn't.
Maybe that's where I draw the line. Yeah, I think you need to go up the coast though, like to the place up where I'm from is Red's Eats in Wiscasset, where all the tourists seem to go, but the traffic's going to be backed up for quite a ways up there. But if you want one, that's where to go.
I was going to say, just for I'm a Luke's Lobster guy in Portland. It's easy and it's fun, and they have a good beer selection.
They win the best of all the time.
Do they? All right, I didn't know that. But for the experience, you got to go to Two Lights in Cape Elizabeth at some point and go to that little lobster shack they have out by the rocks. and just get
that one. I think was on the Food Network. Or
oh, see, so I thought so. See, you're like being a real Mainer and taking us up the coast, and I'm just doing the trendy stuff.
Yeah, I'm bringing it into my neighborhood.
I was at the Dead and Company concert a couple of weeks ago at Fenway, and the dude in right sitting right next to us was the guy from Maine Cabin Masters. Have you ever seen that show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was
wow.
really cool. Yeah, it was Ryan from Maine. I mean, I didn't recognize him, but my son's a huge fan of the show. And we wound up chatting for a while. So there you go.
Oh, you never know who you're going to see at Dead and Company.
Maine people are everywhere. That's the thing. Don't ever forget that. Chad, this was fun.
Sometimes.
I in full disclosure, and the final connection I'll bring up is that I did want to have Dennis Eckersley on the podcast this week as he's in Oakland, and his exact response was, "If I'm not golfing," and then I got a reply later that I'm golfing, and that was that. But you got him to do the forward on the book, which is great, and it's again another guy. There you go, and when you read the forward, you will hear X voice in your head as you read it because it's written the way he would say it to you if you were sitting with him in a room. So
yeah, we sat down and talked through that before we did it at Fenway, and he said, "So what the F do you want me to say?"
Did you pitch him on doing his life story? Because
everybody has.
Yeah, everybody has.
Yeah,
and he said it'll come at a very late stage because he said when I let it fly, there's going to be a lot of people upset. So
yeah. No, I never pitched him on it, but I asked him if anybody else. He said, "Sean, he asks me every year."
Yeah, I think everybody has maybe here. All right. I know you got things to do. I appreciate the visit. This was fun. The book is great. You should check it out. And we'll see you at Fenway. Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, TC.
All right. Great stuff from Chad, and great to get his perspective on the Red Sox and the reaction to this team. Less than 2 weeks now till the trade deadline. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Chaim Bloom and the Red Sox front office does with this team in the days and the weeks ahead. We've got baseball this weekend. The New York Mets at Fenway, the game on Nesson Friday night with coverage beginning at 5:30. The run to home base starting and ending at Fenway Park on Saturday. I'll be part of that, a great tradition to help raise money for the home base program that has done amazing work helping our veterans fight the invisible wounds of war and helping their families through traumatic returns from service. So hopefully you can donate if you can't get to it. If you can get to it, it's a powerful day. So try to get out there Saturday. Big weekend of baseball. Red Sox and Mets will be there throughout it all. But we thank you, as always, for checking things out and swinging by the TC and Company podcast. We'll see you again next week.
Secret Service in the house.
Bucket hat. It's bucket hat time.
TC, you're undefeated, man. You're undefeated.